find them. So obviously also the way in which we were talking about race, ethnicity, or it's totally changed, maybe, and they will change because, for example, I was born and raised in Italy. I have a migrant background because my father was an immigrant, but at the same time I'm migrating here in America because I'm permanent resident card, and my partner is Brazilian, and if we will have a children, maybe we can have here in America or in another country. So maybe our son will born with 2 or 3 citizenship and 2 or 3 different backgrounds, and maybe he will raise in another continent again. And so obviously, and this will happen in the next 15, 20 years. So you can understand how it's difficult to think with rules of way of thinking that we have until 10 years ago.
Great.
Hi, I'm Alessandro. I'm a Trieste, Italy. I live here. I'm a PhD student in this department of geography. I want to thank you first of all for this. I was moved through the movie, but also really angry as well. Right? It's really angering me, like the situation there. My question and my point is really about like momentum for change, really, which linked to your question about Bossi Fini, like and Gianfranco Fini, because you show him as a politician with the European and Italian flags behind him, right? And you choose not to talk about immigration as much, right? You choose not to, like, as you said, talk about the Bossi Fini law, but like there is like a change of hearts, maybe like in him. I don't know if that's true either, but like that's like one sign of like maybe of how the situation is actually changing, maybe like in politics first of all. And second point I wanted to make is that it's the part that related to the most in the movie was about second generation Italians leaving the country and trying to like pursue citizenship in Belgium or France or somewhere else. And this relates to like really like flight from Italy in the sense that like it's very hard to be different in Italy in general. I'm thinking of questions of gender, sexuality, and race, obviously. My generation is generation like on the move, like running away from Italy. It's like a huge part of the population in the 20s were leaving the country. And like I'm making the point, and 2 examples are like obviously like queer Italians. I'm talking about queer Italians of color. I'm talking like Italians with Italian heritage or not. But like Italy is the only country west of Poland and Serbia which doesn't have any sort of recognition of same-sex couples. And I was stopped when I was 16 by the police because I was kissing my boyfriend and wanted to take him to jail. Okay, tell me to take him to jail because I was kissing my boyfriend. Second is it's very hard to be a woman in Italy. Like I'm bringing up the question of like 2 days ago, like a woman was forced to have an abortion by herself with her husband in the bathroom of a hospital because no doctors will help her. So I'm linking these questions because I'm like my research deals with like return migration in Italy as well, and how Italy needs to be shaken. Needs a big change. And as I see like many like Italians who like left the country coming back now, I see that maybe there may be like some momentum for change in dealing with questions of gender, sexuality, race. I wonder if you see that as well. If like the Fini question is indicative of that. If you see a momentum gathering or not. Thank you. And thank you again.
First of all, I have to say always thank you to you for coming, and as I told you before, the connection that we created in the last month with people who are studying here or teaching here, and also with Scott, Bishop, Camilla, and basically also the connection that are globally to try to solve a problem that maybe these young students have at least maybe your same age, and so you are much more careful and you have the will to resolve this issue. So this is very important, and obviously I'm not an expert of every aspect of the Italian society. I became expert about diversity and migration sometimes because I lived in this context for 42 years, and so I think to know many things of Italy in two ways, as Italians sometimes, and sometimes as a young man of color. So I can understand many, sometimes many things more than other Italians. So, but as I told you before, many things are changing in the last 15 years. Also, maybe the things in that I live in my experience, maybe I can't know the answer for many things. And I'm sure. I hope that many things will change. Obviously, everything will change in the country or in the world. So it depends on how many years do you need to make a change. But some phenomena are irreversible in the world. So and sometimes this is a fun and ironic things that I'm doing since I touring the documentary in Italy. Sometimes is to repeat again and speak again or tell again how Italy was the first country in the world to be really diverse during the Roman Empire. They started during the Roman Empire with many population that came from North Africa, Egypt, and at the time Egypt was not only was much more black than Egypt of now. And there were people from Western Europe, the France, Ireland, United Kingdom, people from Eastern Europe, and they became sometimes Roman citizens, they became emperor, general, consul, and all this experience, they continue for other centuries. Also during the Renaissance, there were a lot of cultural influence that came from many parts of the Europe and North Africa, and everything that is made in Italy or is well known as made in Italy, the design, the food, the architecture, the clothes, are a long experience of mixed culture and sometimes race culture and race mixing of people inside the country. And only in the last 2 or 3 centuries we started to think the Italian as something that is a pure or but basically Italian is something that for the 70% or 80% is a mixing biological and culturally of many. And so we have, I think sometimes, especially in educational school, maybe in our program, if we were able to reprise all this story, and maybe also to find all the important people, the name of many important people that just because they have a Latin name we recognize as Italian, but basically sometimes they were from Libya or from, so if we were able to reprise all these steps of our history, maybe we understand how Italy is a place where diversity has been created and when diversity can be again developed. And also as an example for other countries.
I really wish that Mia Fuller was here because of her research on the creation of national Italian identity against Africa, against different racial tones and skin tones. So I think it would be wonderful if we could develop that sometimes.
Hi. I had a quick question, and I don't know if this is very basic. I'm not very familiar with Black European history. So I'm wondering, I guess specifically in Italy, but also in other European countries, like what is, I guess, blackness in these countries? Like, because that refers to was in the United States we consider all people of color, or is it like I don't want to say, I don't know, what is blackness in Italy or blackness in Europe? Does it include lots of different?
For Europe, we have the professor that is much more expert because for Italy, the only thing that I can say you, and also it's many things are changing also here in America. What does it mean to be black now in America in 2014? And sometimes, what does it mean to be something? How can I say, in a proposal positive way? Because sometimes you are also something because the people recognize you or you are suffering some problems. So maybe it's also, it could be interesting to know what does it mean to be black in Europe when you are suffering issue, because maybe many things or many people who have black roots in Europe or are suffering the same. But maybe when we're talking about the identity, they have maybe a total different identity in the other part of the life. In Italy, I think that is something that is, again, something that there was maybe since Hannibal, the blackness of our country, but it's something that in the last 3 centuries has gone. It's something that now has been maybe reprised, and so obviously the guys as Valentino or the guys that intervene in the documentary maybe are the right person to give an answer to what does it mean to be black in Italy, because I'm 42, and when I was born and raised, I was one of the first few people of African roots in not only in my city but also in the Republic of Italy. And obviously at the time there were few, I think that I didn't see any particular image of black Italy history. Or so, for example, I remember that when I was 14 or 12, my idol were the Brazilian soccer, because they were the only few well-known people of color in Italy were only the Brazilian soccer. And then when the NBA became popular also in Italy, in the mid of the 80s, 83, 84, obviously the other black person famous in Italy were the African American player of the NBA. So, and then the television became the many series, and the Cosby Show, or and I think that for many, in every case black European, in every case the television and the African American series television played a strong role to define the identity, especially for the country, not the United Kingdom and France, where there was just an experience of people of color, but for the country as Italy or Germany, that were a country in which basically at the time there were not a strong presence of African immigrants. But for Europe, I don't know, so I think that...
I can answer that question. I mean, you have to make a distinction between Britain and continental Europe. In Britain, the idea of black is much more elaborate, in the sense that until 1990, almost all the people from former British colonies were black, including Indians, Asians, and all those things. But things changed in the 1980s. First, the issue of positive essentialism, that is what Stuart called it, where black was in the 50s a negative connotation of those people who came from the former colonies. And later on it was embraced in the context of black power and all those things. So, civil rights movement and all. So, black in Britain until the 1990s was for every person who were from the former colonies. Therefore, you could meet an Asian Indian who calls him or herself black. Now, in the 80s, something changed, especially with the Iranian Revolution, which brought the issue of Islam to the fore, and therefore the British press started talking about the Muslims, and therefore the Muslims started drifting out of these issues, especially with the Salman Rushdie affair in this thing. So the Asian community became also divided into three, and especially after the assassination of Indira Gandhi. Then you got the Asian community, then you got the Sikh community, you have the Hindu community, and you have the Muslim community. So since the 90s, if people say black, then they meet people of African and Afro-Caribbean descent in Britain now. But until the 1990s, black was essentially everyone from the former colonies. But then they were black citizens. They were British citizens. That was the case. But in continental Europe, they do not accept the concept of black in continental Europe. Partly because they say they do not do census. In Britain, you have self-identification, you have census, so you can determine your ethnicity. They have about 8 categories, just like the US. So when you talk about blackness in Europe, then continental Europe, they say you are borrowing American terms, and that this is not valid here. So in France and places, they don't want to talk about blacks, and they don't want to talk about statistics. That's why I was also talking about. So then you have the German situation where you have Afro-Germans. And those who call themselves Afro-Germans are former US military personnel, African Americans, who were based in Germany and who had children, and then left the children there, who have become now generation who call themselves Afro-Europeans or Black Europeans or Afro-Germans. Yeah, so the concept of black is still contested. But at my summer school on Black Europe, we use black to classify all those people who identify themselves black and who were born in Europe, so to speak, which makes it different from the issue of immigrants. Yeah, but in Europe, they want to collapse both the status of black people and immigrants into one. Yeah, and that is what makes the Italian situation problematic, in the sense that they talk more about immigrants than the citizens. Yeah, in 1972, my friend Chris Muller, who wrote the book Black Britain, was the first person to use the concept Black Britain, whereas people like Sivananda and Enoch Powell, who were talking about immigrants and all those things. So that has been the shift. Yeah, so that is the context. Yeah.
I have a burning question, and it's about a book that I'm reading right now that each page is so important to me on the subject of immigration and different ethnic groups. And it's written by David Remnick, who is a Pulitzer Prize winner and a journalist. And it's about 300 pages. It's called The Bridge. Has anyone heard of it? Have you read it?
Yeah, no.
It's about Barack Obama. It's his entire biography, from Hawaii to Indonesia to Kenya to Chicago, etc. And all of his grammar school, high school, and college, and university, and law school, and everything that he's done or said is in this book. So that if anyone doubts what it's like to be a kid who doesn't know that he's considered a certain ethnic group until he gets out into the public, etc. So I really wanted everyone to hear about that.
Okay. For example, just the thing that is connected to the story of the President Obama is the story of the brother of Obama. I don't know if you know, but he has one of his brother that was born by the same father that actually is brilliant as the president, because he received a master in engineering in Yale, and they worked as an engineer for 15 years, and he moved in China 10 years ago, and he married a Chinese woman. So, and this is, I think, is the way in which we are going. The way in which we are going is not people or kids with two roots, but people and kids with 2 or 3 or 4 roots, different roots, and with different relation between power country that sometimes are not more the Western country, but are the Chinese country or the African country. This is the future of the next 40 years.
No, let me cut you in there. I have a problem with your answer to that, because on the one hand, you say things are changing, but the very thing which you showed there, that is citizenship, is not changing. So what is changing? Because when we ask questions about the issue, your movie is on citizenship, how they will gain citizenship. But it seems to me that your answers are going to the direction of hybridity, that mixed marriages and all these things are changing. But the point is, there's also something that is not changing. The question is, how do you address that? What is not changing?
It's not changing in the moment, the citizenship. So for this reason, I did a documentary, and we hope to have a solution, and I'm sure that we have. And this documentary is not only targeted for the young people born in Italy, but is also targeted for the new people that we will be born in everywhere, and from every kind of class, not only for people that are considered immigrants just because they are trying to find a better job or they came from a difficult situation. Also the middle class or the high class in the future, not in the future now, that we are traveling in different countries, and maybe they are marrying now people, and they will have children in the next 4 years, and that we have this problem of the citizenship, not in Italy, maybe they will have this same problem in Kuwait or in China. So obviously, we try to make possible that people start to think that citizenship is not only a problem of the others. It's not only a problem of the people that are Italians, it's not a problem of the people who are undocumented here in America, but it could be a problem also of our sons or of your sons if they will decide to have a future in another country.
No. I see it as Italian problem because citizenship in Netherlands, France, and Britain is different from citizenship in Italy, but they are all in the European Union. And those people who were speaking about citizenship. They were not speaking about hybridity, that they will have nice people to marry, they will have different cultures, they will have this. They were talking about concrete things. How do they travel? How do they get the same right as Italians and all those? So that concrete issue, and you said the president said something 12 years ago, 14 years ago, and nothing has changed. But you are saying that we are going to the direction of hybridity, and that nothing will matter, or whatever. But we are leaving the issue of citizenship. We're not talking about Kuwait. We're talking about Italy, because in a country like Dubai, even if you were born there, you have to wait for 25 years. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Italy, which is part of the European Union, and then the challenge this faces, whereas different European countries have different citizenship rights and rules. How does Italy fit in that? And that is why I also found it a bit strange that none of the speakers were referring the issue to the, let's say, European Union, to say that this issue has to be resolved by European court, rather than settling it in Italy, which may not be settled, because I was asking, where is the solidarity coming from? Do you leave it to the politicians who change their minds every time? And then the issue of the number games. For the Italian society as a whole, 900,000 people is marginal, it's not relevant to do, unless they start causing a lot of trouble. Or the point is, what does the Italian government got to lose for not granting them citizenship? Has it got anything to lose? Yeah. So the point I'm making is that we can say some things are changing, but some things are not changing. And I understand your movie was about citizenship, and therefore I would suggest that for your propaganda, you become consistent on that propaganda machine and say that citizenship is the reason why you made this film, and that we should be able to check and trace whether something has changed or whether citizenship issue will be resolved. Yeah? Because that is how I understand your film. Unless you say you have different.
If people have also different questions, we can also talk about other things. No, someone.
I have a comment.
So I had two questions. One was